Now, whatever our political differences, we are joined with an unwavering resolve that freedom will always triumph over tyranny. That from Joe Biden as he asked lawmakers crowding the House for the State of the Union speech to stand and salute ordinary Ukrainians as he began his speech there. Biden warning Vladimir Putin that dictators have to pay a price for their aggression.
Justice of the Supreme Court, my fellow Americans. Ukrainians are fighting back with pure courage. But the next few days, weeks, and months will be hard on them. Putin has unleashed violence and chaos. But while he may make gains on the battlefield, he'll pay a continuing high price over the long run.
Joe Biden there. Well, joining me now here on set for Perspective today is Martin Quencez. He's Fellow of Deputy Director of the Paris office of the German Marshall Fund of the United States, a non-partisan policy organisation which supports the idea that the US and Europe are stronger together, supporting peace and democracy since the end of World War II. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. I mean, Joe Biden was inevitably really hitting out in that speech, wasn't he, at Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, obviously he had to start with Ukraine, which he did. However, I mean, the targeted audience of the speech of the State of the Union is the American people. So we could see that as much as he sort of described the situation and describe what the US is trying to do, the point was to say we will be okay and to reassure the American people that although there will be a cost for them as well in this crisis, the Biden administration will be able to manage this. So I think if you expected Joe Biden to provide some sort of a great vision for this conflict, what it meant for the world, you might have been disappointed. However, if you wanted to understand exactly what the US has been doing for months, trying to build coalitions, trying to reinforce unity among transatlantic partners, then you got what you wanted.
I mean, he also sort of gave some indication of what the US plans to do, for example, about Russian oligarchs, that kind of thing, the kind of measures that he wants to keep taking.
Yes, so there needs to be some measures, some options left. However, what you can see, and I mean, this is something that is true in Europe as well, is that the leverage that we have at this point is rather limited. If there is a further intensification of the conflict, which probably will happen, and more violence, more violations of human rights in Ukraine, we feel that we don't necessarily have much options left to counter this kind of actions. So as much as you have now this list of sanctions that have been already implemented, perhaps a possibility to increase the pressure on oligarchs, on some of the Russian elite, there is a sense, both in Europe and in the US, that this will not be enough to deter Vladimir Putin. And in the end, we stand sort of helpless in this situation to help the Ukrainian people.
I mean, there were other measures, for example, the closing of airspace over the US for Russian aircraft.
Yes, so that is one of the suggestions that were made. We've seen over the past couple of days a number of European countries taking these measures, and now, in fact, the entire airspace is closed to Russian aircraft. These kind of measures will probably be responded by Russia with some sort of countermeasure that will affect European and American companies. What we see also is something that is not necessarily what the Biden administration can implement, but what private companies themselves decide to do. So Apple decided to stop selling in Russia a certain number of broadcasting organizations and channels. So we will see perhaps the private sector also acting as some sort of additional pressure on Russia.
And tying in with what you said there, I mean, Biden giving a real firm commitment that no troops in Ukraine, no US troops.
Yeah, so I think it was important for the Biden administration. And this is something, to be fair, he's been very clear with that since the very beginning of the military buildup last year, at the end of last year, that no American troops will be directly engaged in the conflict in Ukraine. However, the American support for NATO allies and the American commitment to Article 5 is absolutely strong. There is a sense that the American posture is that the Ukrainians will have to fight on their own. There will be support, but there is a difference between a NATO ally and Ukraine, and this is something that Joe Biden had to say. One thing that he didn't mention, however, is the sort of hostile rhetoric by Vladimir Putin on nuclear weapons, something that we've heard over the past few days, that the American officials have remained quite quiet about, trying not to enter into this this kind of escalation and nuclear debate. This was quite interesting in the speech yesterday that he didn't mention that at all.
More generally, I mean, Joe Biden's in quite a lot of trouble, isn't he, at home? His polls are not looking good. He's coming up to those midterm elections fairly soon now. I mean, do you think this speech will make any difference? Because a lot of people are saying that actually what Americans are worried about, of course, is the pound in their pocket, the money in their pocket, the dollar in their pocket. That's what is really preoccupying Americans, and that's why his polls are not looking so good.
Yeah, so as I said, this speech is meant to talk to the American people, not to you and I here in Europe. This is a speech that will not be a turning point in the campaign, but it was important for him to show that he's done a lot, although this is one of the main criticisms that you hear from the American people, if you look at the polls, that they think that the Biden administration has done nothing and has not, in fact, implemented all the promises that were made in 2020 during the campaign. The second thing is that he had to reassure the American people about the future, and especially on inflation. This, as you said, is the main concern right now. This is going to get worse as we see the impact of the sanctions on Russia, and especially the implications on energy prices. So there was this sentence that I think in the middle of the speech that sort of summarized the whole idea, is that we will be okay. And I think this kind of reassuring message is what we wanted to convey. However, there are another 8 months now, or perhaps 10, to 8 months to the midterms. A lot will happen. I think one of the things that sort of is missing right now is that we see the American political landscape as sort of not as sort of united, perhaps not united, but there is some sort of bipartisan support for what needs to be done on Ukraine. This is very superficial. This will not go on as we get closer to the midterms, and this will get ugly again.
And just in 30 seconds, I mean, those midterms, as we say, ahead, it really isn't looking very good for him, is it? Of course, the midterms traditionally not good for a sitting president.
Yes, at this point, there are about 70% of the American people who believe that the US is not going in the right direction. All the projections sort of show that the Democrats would lose at least the House and potentially even the Senate, which would clearly put a stop in the middle of the Biden administration and the Biden presidency. I think as we get closer to the midterms, Democrats will get a bit more anxious, and perhaps we'll see more legislations being signed at the Senate because they need to show that they're doing something.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks for coming in. Martin Quencez, Fellow of the Deputy Director of the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Thanks.